Let's talk a little bit about compassion. And a lot of people say you feel compassion towards the narcissistic person, right? There are people out there who haven't experienced narcissistic relationships. Yes, there are people out there in the world who come from happy, non-manipulative, non-narcissistic families and have nice friends and marry a nice person and have nice kids and they work in nice places with nice people. Yay for them. Enjoy your Powerball life. They're not watching this channel. But when narcissistic abuse or narcissistic relationships or all of it doesn't happen to someone, and they hear a story about when it does happen to someone else, they fall into something I've talked about many times on this channel, sort of the easy, just world bullshit. They'll say nonsense to you. Things like, oh, come on now. Like, this didn't just come out of nowhere. You had to have seen it coming. He seemed like a nice guy. Your mom seems like a nice lady. There's always two sides to every story. It's not that simple. You've heard all of this, right? So then the person who has been harmed, perhaps in a divorce, by an abandoning parent, by a crooked business partner, the person who's harmed is the one who's looked at suspiciously. Strangely enough, not the person who did the harming, the person who was harmed. The world gives the side eye to victims, survivors, to people who are on the wrong end of emotionally abusive or narcissistic relationships. They often get viewed as the problem. And on top of that, we shame people who come out and share their stories and experiences and say, oh, that is so cringe. Why are you sharing that? Like there is dignity and privacy. Like, what is this going to do to your kids, to your coworker, to your family if you share this publicly? Like, why are you dragging people through the mud? What this has done is that it has effectively silenced the majority of survivors. And since time immemorial, survivors often have had less power, for example, women, and were even less likely to be believed and would definitely be shamed if they went public with stories about betraying spouses. Behind every person who has been through atrocious narcissistic abuse, emotional abuse, or anything in that wheelhouse, out there is some kind of judgmental church lady type, some cold country club type, some emotionally coiled and callous type who defends the person who did the abusing and launches into a, well, we don't know the other side kind of superiority. And basically what they are saying without saying it is how dare you soil my vision of a just world? How dare you soil my fantasy where we can be kept away from this? In the world as it is, the person who dares speak out about what happened to them will be doubted, shamed, blamed, looked at sideways, avoided, maligned, and viewed as, well, since that other person isn't saying anything, maybe you are the problem since you're the only one who's airing dirty laundry. I mean, enablers, the just worlders, the status quoers, I actually think that they're every bit as harmful as the person who's engaging in the abuse. Listen, there's the guy who throws the punch, and there's the guys who hold the guy being punched. They are all perpetrators, and they are all dangerous. And the corollary to that is that in the mainstream, when someone shares the story of what happened to them and may talk about the person who harmed them, who abused them, narcissistic, sociopathic, psychopathic, emotionally immature, or just an asshole, whatever that person was, call it what you will. The tendency by most folks is to want to understand the abuser. They'll start asking the questions. Well, what was their childhood like? Why do you think they're like this? And we hear things like, well, Maybe they're just really insecure. Maybe they just feel really disenfranchised and misunderstood. There is a crisis of masculinity out there. Maybe they didn't get to express their feelings. Maybe they never got to spread their wings. Life wasn't always easy for them. Maybe they were just being self-protective. Perhaps this is just post-traumatic. Listen, I can play that damn game all day and all night. I spent a lot of my career understanding the why of narcissistic behavior. I could talk about it chapter and verse forever. And I am even happy to engage the discussion because I think it's an important one to have. But, and yes, I am saying but instead of and. This conversation can only happen if there are compassion and respect and an equal, genuine curiosity about the person who's harmed in the relationship. Listen, I get it. In true crime, which is an extremely popular genre, the pitch is that if we can understand the perpetrator, the fantasy is that maybe we can be safer. We can protect ourselves. We can see those alleged red flags. Maybe we can prevent it. We can't. It's just not how laws, at least in the United States, are written. We get the luxury of seeing the crime unfurled backwards to front and may even feel like, oh, how could that victim not have seen the killer in their midst? It was so obvious. Of course, again, there is the just world of it all. Maybe if we can see that the person who did the emotional abusing was just an unfortunate, misunderstood person. And actually, this was really kind of the victim's fault because they were bad too. And now, oh, can you see how bad they are? They are talking about it publicly. Ew, ick. And in that contemptuous dismissiveness, we successfully demonize the survivor. We remain curious about the perpetrator. And people can just keep their convenient view of the world. I do believe that we have healthy curiosity, empathic awareness of the person who does the harming in the relationship, who's basically the narcissistic person. I believe we can have healthy curiosity there. And maybe they're not narcissistic. Whatever it is, though, they're behaving badly in that relationship. The challenge with narcissism is that we can never quite crack the nut, right? The narcissistic folks don't have the capacity or really the willingness to harness the mental access to what motivates them. They really don't. In some ways, it then becomes the snake swallowing its own tail. To see the truth of what motivates the narcissistic person would actually be the end of them. It would be catastrophic. All of their defenses would have to crumble. Their ordinariness would be known to the world. Their vulnerability would be aired naked as the day they were born, unless they have one hell of a good therapist. It is sort of an implosion of the self for the narcissistic person. So we never really get the full story. We try to piece it together with the precision of a detective trying to solve a case. But ultimately, most survivors of narcissistic abuse or any form of emotional or relational abuse never really get a good answer from abusive partners or family members, and will spend a lifetime holding the bag of, well, what was wrong with me? Then, when the world piles on and shames the survivors for talking about what happened to them, it is a miracle, honestly, that anyone talks about what happens to them, and yet we must, for the simple reason so that people recognize that they're not alone. And it also does something really important. It breaks through the shame, and when we do that, we can begin to heal. So yes, back to that empathic awareness. We can, and perhaps I really do believe we should have for all people, yes, including the narcissistic folks. Sometimes it is that the people or the person who hurt you is deeply insecure. They use power and control to dominate others so they can feel big and keep others small. They are pathologically selfish to protect themselves. And their entitlement comes out of their grandiose defenses, the grown-up Superman cape that they tie around their neck that allows them to keep that vulnerable child and that uncomfortable cauldron of insecurity and ordinariness, the fear of being unmasked as it was, at bay. And yes, this insecurity may come out of a childhood for the narcissistic person where the world didn't feel safe. Maybe they were physically abused or tormented by parents or caretakers or siblings or family members or other kids. Maybe they were bullied. Maybe they observed domestic violence and they were completely powerless in the face of it. Maybe they grew up with a constant threat and presence of danger. And maybe there was just simply not enough resource. Maybe there was the constant risk of eviction, of adults disappearing. Maybe they struggled in school and faced bullying and mockery instead of support and compassion. These origin stories don't always culminate. In fact, they don't typically culminate in the evolution of narcissistic and antagonistic personalities, but in a lot of people, these personalities, this is their story. The vast majority of people who grow up with trauma and adversity, like I said, do not become antagonistic, but most narcissistic and antagonistic personalities have some form of adversity in their backstory. Or, as other researchers have found, they were overindulged, spoiled, reminded of their crown prince status, their specialness more than any other child. And then that plants a seed of a sort of imposterness. Because once they go out into the real world, they're reminded of their imposterness since they were anointed instead of earning their specialness in the world. And they realize they are ordinary and they clap back. Many narcissistic people have an imposter syndrome lurking right under the surface. And the more severe the narcissism or antagonism, the less it is about insecurity and imposterness and vulnerability, and the more it is about domination and power and control. Who knows? Perhaps they are modeling or mimicking early aggression that they witnessed in their lives, a sort of Darwinian zero-sum game where the strongest gets to take everything. The more severe the personality issues, the more we may be likely to see central nervous system issues, structural and connective issues that would blunt awareness of the other, diminished empathy, behavioral impulsivity. Okay? All of that can help us understand narcissism. And yes, we can have empathy for those backstories. They suck. And we can also call their behavior what it is, which is unacceptable. Both things are true. And most importantly, and this is really what's crucial, we must hold the same level of empathy for survivors whose greatest crime and failing was trying to attach to an unsafe person, for trying to love and make sense of a confusing person who was using them to regulate, rather than engaging in a reciprocal, mutual, safe, kind, loving relationship with them, for trying to appease them, and ultimately and slowly self-abandoning to connect themselves to the narcissistic person. We can have empathy for cycles such as trauma bonding, our natural tendency to get stuck in intermittent reinforcement cycles. We can recognize that the vast majority of survivors blame themselves for years, for decades, damn close to lifetimes, for what happened. And when the day comes that they say, whoa, this is what happened, and share that with the world, and for the world to shut that discourse down, can lead a lot of survivors back into a corner, into a shell. It is an act of defiance, of rebellion and revolution to name what happened to you after years of believing that you were the one who was at fault, after years of taking responsibility for behavior that wasn't yours. That is what we can do, holding an equal willingness to have as much empathy for the survivor as the world seems to have for the person engaging in the abuse. As people go on quests to silence the voices, to shame the voices of people who have been through these kinds of relationships, and yes, even therapists have been known to be guilty of this too, to shame people putting their stories of being harmed out there, to uphold the goodness of the abusers so they can keep their childlike visions of a safe, just, equitable world. All the people who want to make it about two to tango, 50-50 responsibility in harmful relationships and breakups, who want to pathologize people who can't repair, which is impossible to do. You can't repair a relationship when the abusing party won't be accountable. All of those folks who want to be the narcissistic people, cheerleaders, enablers, and amplifiers, who want to shame survivors. All I ask is that to anyone who does this, if you're even watching this, that you listen to the story of the survivor and notice that if you actually did follow up and ask the narcissistic person what happened, go get the other side of the story, they'll probably blame the other person. Or give you a non-answer, I don't know. While the survivors, the people who have been through this, they will always continue to look inward. They'll continue to wonder, what did they do wrong? What did they do wrong? They'll share their story and frankly often knock themselves out in trying to remain fair to the person who harmed them. I see this in survivors all the time. I know I'm going to tell this story, but I want to be fair to them. I am so sick of the pendulum swing these days. I just had to share this. Healing is hard enough from these relationships, and it can feel impossible when people shame you for doing so. And I need to stop going on Reddit. Though thanks for the inspiration. Thanks again.